All right, so thanks, Gary, for being my first guest on my channel. Congratulations or condolences, whichever one's applicable. And we'll go from there.
Well, we'll see.
All right, so really, I just want to start off. I went, I did a search with just for you, and then I came up with the Marvel fandom wiki and the DC fandom wiki. So, I mean, you've got a lot of books on there. So I guess start off, like, what was your first professional book?
I started out working at DC as kind of a background assistant type guy. So I have a lot of credits that aren't credited in the book.
Right.
But dozens of jobs that I did backgrounds on for artists like Dick Giordano, Bob Smith, Bob Layton, Steve Mitchell, guys like that at that time. I'm talking about early 80s. And the very first background job I did was for Joe Staten on a Green Lantern Corps. And
you remember what book that was?
Because there was a panel of a bunch of tiny little aliens. It was some, science fiction type story, Green Lantern. And there was a panel of a lot of little tiny aliens, and first figure work that I inked, and I stuck Pogo in the crowd. So I was really proud of myself getting away with that, with putting Pogo in a crowd of aliens. But that was Green Lantern Corps. I think it was just a regular Green Lantern book, and it had a Brian Bolin cover on it. That highly influenced me.
Right, of course.
But I think the Green Lantern Corps, the backup story.
So
I think in those days they use lots of background artists. Inkers did that allowed them to do more pages. And as an example, Dick Giordano was the highest paid inker at DC at that time. And his page rate was $60 a page. And back then that was like big money. I wish I got $60 a page.
Right.
He paid me 20%. So that comes out to like what, $12. So that was great. $12 a page.
Right.
And I was doing, maybe I was pretty slow back then. I'm still slow, but I was really slow back then. I was doing maybe 2 or 3 pages a day. And he was doing 4 or 5 pages a day because he didn't have to do the backgrounds. He was just inking the figures.
Right.
And I was erasing the pages and filling in the blacks and, pretty much everything other than inking the figures. And so that's how he increased his income, by me doing the grunt work on the, on the inking.
Sure.
He could do more pages and more income. And he was a machine. I mean, he was really fast. And he had a take the money and run inking style, which was pretty fast and sloppy. And then he had a I really care about this job inking style. And if you look at some of his, like especially his covers, obviously Neil Adams stuff, that's his I care about this job inking style. When he did care, that his inking was amazing. Just, you couldn't touch it. But he had a different philosophy of inking. It was very specific. I kind of chalked up my low page rate as being part page rate, part experience, because he would always give me a critique after every job that I would turn in. But the problem was it was his specific style. And he would give me a critique as an example that no state job. There was a crass rocket ship in the background of one of the panels, and he was showing me how to add a metal texture to it. And he put some cross hatching in there, and it looked really cool. And then I was showing that page later to Joe Orlando, who was the head honcho at DC that time, for a critique. And the one thing he pointed out, he says, you know, this is really good, but I don't like this metal texture on this rock head.
Right.
So he pointed specifically to the Dick Giordano inked piece in there. You know, so it was very confusing, especially for some green kid from California, you know, in the big city. It was New York at the time.
Right. So his critique was more of just, if you want to be like me, this is how you do it, instead of just overall telling you how to work out your own or figure out your own style.
He didn't really give me an alternative. He just said he didn't like it. He just said he didn't like it. He didn't say you should do it this way. Joe Orlando was kind of an odd duck. I mean, he didn't really do much. He just was kind of a figurehead, kind of like Stan Lee. You know, for decades, Stan Lee didn't do anything, but they gave him credit for everything.
Right. It's still brought to you by Stan Lee.
Yeah, Joe Orlando was kind of the same thing at DC. I hope I don't get flack for that, but that was my impression.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. I mean, 4 people are going to see this, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay, I hope I don't tick off 4 people.
Yeah. I'm not worried about it. So I guess, you know, that brings, you know, you've done a lot of books. Do you have one that stands out as a favorite, or I don't know, just a job that you've done that you're like, just a favorite of yours?
Probably the one, when people ask me that question, the one that comes to mind is I worked a couple of years for Disney. And this is when my Marvel and DC work kind of dried up. Disney started publishing new material, and Len Wein was the main editor, and I had worked for him at DC. So he hired me at Disney, and I was able to ink the Mickey Mouse book that had the adaptation of Sorcerer's Apprentice from the film. And they sent us a ton of reference material from the film, original, obviously Xeroxes of the original drawings and model sheets and design, background designs and all that stuff as reference. So I had a pile, literally, of reference material. And just thinking that stuff, it made me feel like I was actually doing something legitimate, you know, something that people knew about and something that.
I mean, you don't think they knew about your Marvel? Or, I mean, Marvel was popular at that time. You know, you said that Disney was like legitimized you, but you know, you did all that work with Marvel. That certainly got some attention.
Well,
Marvel wasn't some
time,
underground publisher.
Right. At that time, comic books were not seen as that important. People looked down on comics.
Right. Okay.
It was absolutely, completely different cultural viewpoint of comics. There weren't any movies, no TV shows. I mean, it was just, well, the one TV shows that were on were really bad.
Right.
They were looked down on. And when people asked me what I did, I had to be careful. I always would say, well, I'm an illustrator or an artist. And if people poked and they started asking my kinds of questions, I could see that they were interested in art. And then I would tell them what I did. and then they would be, even more interested. But if I just led with, yeah, I'm a comic book artist, sometimes the conversation turned cold really fast.
Right.
But for Disney, and especially doing work on Mickey Mouse, everybody knows that stuff, and everybody has fond memories of that stuff from their childhood.
Yeah, sure. If you say I work at Disney or for Disney, I mean, that on your resume compared to, yeah, I drew Green Lantern, to who's that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so at the time, it was a big thrill. And plus, I've always loved the cartoons and the Capri Sun newspaper strips from decades and decades ago. That was great stuff. The really old stuff when Mickey was a hellraiser before they, kind of softened his personality. But he was like Indiana Jones type, getting into trouble all the time and rescuing his friends.
Right, right. Yeah, I remember Sunday afternoon, run home, slide in front of the TV, Wonderful World of Disney at 6 o'clock.
Oh yeah, with the one where Walt would give the introduction.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then always a disappointment when it wasn't a cartoon and it was some live action thing. I'm like, oh, well, that's.
But they had some amazing films. Scarecrow with Patrick McGowan. That was awesome.
Right.
He's like a superhero in Scotland or Ireland. I can't remember where it was. What else? I like the Daniel Boone one, but but some of them were not as interesting as the cartoons. The cartoons were ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, one thing I see is working on Marvel Comics Presents, which is a favorite of mine, especially you're up there in the 70s, right before the Weapon X comes out.
Yeah, that was kind of lucky, the timing of it, that the work that I did in there was over Paul Glacy on the Shaun of the She-Devil series.
Right.
And they put that in with Barry Smith's Weapon X stuff. And it sold like crazy, not because of Paul Glacy. But Paul did some amazing work on that series. I mean, he pulled out, all his arsenal on that, and that's a body of work that I'm proud of, because Paul's very particular in who he wants to ink him, and guys like that are demanding, and rightfully so, puts more pressure on the inker. So if you are able to pull it off in terms of, that he's happy with the inking, then that makes me even, more proud of the work.
Right.
And so when it ended up in those books with Barry Smith, that was pretty cool.
Are you doing stuff currently with any publishers, or are you just doing your own stuff, or what's going on today?
Most of the work that I do is commissions, or just work that I put up for sale on
Comic Art Fans
or eBay or your site. But most of it is commissions. Every once in a while, I'll do something for a small publisher. The last thing I did that came out, I don't know, a month or two ago, was Full Mag, Veteran Stories Illustrated. Hold on a sec.
Yeah.
Full Mag, Veteran Stories Illustrated. That's my cover. And it's stories done by different artists from stories told by the veterans themselves of their experiences in different theaters. So it's not adaptions of the stories by someone else. They're in their own words, describing what happened to them, and then we illustrate the stories based on what they're saying.
Yeah, I think I've got the first issue of that.
Yeah, so that was volume 3. I also did some work in volume 2. I didn't do any in volume 1. So in volume 3, the book that I just held up, the story that I did in there is about a guy who survived a Tiger tank attack in World War II. And his description was what him and his guys were occupying like a farmhouse.
Right.
And I think how he describes what happened was we got an eviction notice in the form of a Tiger tank. And the Tiger actually fired on a house as they were diving out the back window. Yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So those are the kind of stories that are in that magazine. That's work that I'm very proud of, because it chronicles stories of veterans that we would never hear otherwise.
Right.
And a lot of the veterans, they're doing this because of urging from their families. Their families want them to get their stories out there. It's typical veterans that they don't talk much about.
Right. They just did it.
Yeah, you know about that, but especially World War II veterans.
Right.
And the sad part about it is there aren't many of them around anymore. And we've even had cases where the veteran has told a story, and between the time he told a story and it came out in the magazine, they passed away and they didn't see it. So getting these stories down, you know, specifically so the families can see this stuff.
So where can we buy that?
From the website, you can get it directly from the website, fullmag.com.
What was it called? You cut
Full
out.
Mag. It's the title of the magazine.
Fullmag.com. Okay.
And what else? Oh, I just recently updated my inking book. The art of comic book inking. This is like the revised edition. And there's a chapter in there on digital inking. So that's how new it is. I updated some of the artwork. And
well, that brings me to two things, because so just my story with you is, you know, I think I found you on Comic Art Fans, like looking at like the images that are behind you and just seeing, like when you posted those on Comic Art Fans, and I was just like, oh my God, those are awesome. I don't know, what is that Huntress one over your right shoulder is just, yeah. I mean, that piece is just amazing. So, you know, I saw those and I contacted you, but I tried to get your inking book. But if you go on Amazon and that, it's like $150.
Yeah, that's a timing thing. When the current print run sells out, then opportunists on Amazon will raise the price.
Right.
And it's getting like that now, that there's only a few copies left from the last print run, and I'm trying to get Dark Horse to do another printing, and they're thinking about it.
Right. Well, I just wanted it out of curiosity, because
sure,
I'm sure it's a great book, but it's not going to help my art any.
Well, that's also why, one of the reasons why I wrote it is that inking is for non-artists, well, not even just non-artists, even people in the industry, it's a big mystery. What does an inker actually do? Because you're responsibilities. And just explaining the art form, what goes into it, so people understand what the inker's responsibilities are. And then also it's a how-to book. So if you aspire to be a professional inker, that's what it's for. And then there's a lot of input from other artists that talk about their techniques and what tools they use and their approaches. It's not just inking by Gary Martin. There's a lot of guys in there, like
Okay.
it's a who's who. Brian Boland, Terry Austin, Steve Rude, Joe Rubenstein, Mike Royer, who else? Dave Stevens, Mark Schultz, Scott Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on of people that have inked stuff on the same pencils. And so you can compare what they're doing compared to
Right,
what
right.
somebody else would do on the same pencils.
But you're not moving away from traditional into digital, or are you just doing that as an educational point?
Yeah, well, digital inking is absolutely a viable option today.
Right.
I am not a fan of it. I don't think it really adds anything. It isn't faster. It isn't better. It's just another option. My biggest beef with it is that when you're finished, you have nothing to show for it. It's digital.
Right.
I mean, when I'm working on a piece of artwork, I got something, to show for it. This is tangible, it's real. And I can sell it, so it's something that lasts when you're doing it traditionally by hand.
Right. Well, yeah, of course. And as an art collector, digital doesn't really interest me,
No, right. Because there's nothing, you can get a poster or something, but
yeah, I mean,
I don't understand that mentality that there artists who do digital are okay with that. Probably the best example is Brian Boland. His original artwork is, through the roof.
yeah, it is.
He stopped doing.
I missed your whole Boland.
Okay, Brian Boland went from the pinnacle of the art form to doing it digital, and his originals, our prices are crazy.
Right.
Well, he just does it because he enjoys the process. He likes it. That baffles me. And there's a legitimate argument for quality of line as you get older. You can't control, especially if you're a brush inker like I am, your quality of line starts to diminish. It really deteriorates.
Right.
You can solve that problem if you're inking digitally, but it's a different look. If you look at Brian's stuff now compared to his brush inking, it's different. It's still Boland, but well, I'll let anyone who wants to make that comparison come up with the adjective to describe the difference. I'm not going to.
Right. No, it's not really something you can describe, but if you hold them next to each other, there's just something there that, just the way you see it.
Yeah, I think it's the traditional way is more organic. It's not as precise. So there are fluctuations in line quality, and that is part of the charm of the artwork. It's not perfect.
Right.
Sometimes digital art can be too perfect. If you're into that kind of thing, then digital's for you.
Yeah. Well, obviously perfect's not my thing. So
that's, and plus brush inking and even crow quill inking for comics is a dying art, because not only because of digital inking, but because of modern pens, like Pitt and Copic markers, and there's a bunch of brands that they're soft tip pens, and
right.
a lot today are using those pens, and they're not learning the traditional methods and getting the types of lines that you can get with dip crow quills and brushes. That old-fashioned thick to thin lines, the lines that have, you know, life to them, it's very difficult to get those kinds of lines with the modern soft tip pens. And so the inking today is different. It's more static, not as much line weight variety. There's a lot of monotony to it. If you compare, you know, as an example, John Romita Spider-Man, you look at the ink lines compared to how they're inking Spider-Man today, absolutely a different animal, just completely different. And in my opinion, it's not a good difference. It's a shortcut, which really drags down the quality of the craft. So the inking book was my personal attempt to try to
Pull people back.
Well, yes, that, but just to keep the craft of comic book inking alive. And it did for a while, but I belong to a comic book inking Facebook group, and a huge percentage of the people that are on that group are soft pen inkers, and they show their work, and it looks, they're basically turning into Xerox machines where they're just literally tracing over the pencil lines with pens that pretty much do the same thing a pencil does, only make the lines darker. That's all they're doing, is making the lines darker. And there's so much more to inking than just making the lines darker. And they don't understand that. So that's my beef with.
I'm looking at your calf right now, and obviously, so the most viewed piece in there is you have a ball and tank girl. I don't know, honestly, just your inking, I don't have an adjective for it. I just, for whatever reason, I just am drawn to that cross hatching and that brushwork.
Yeah, brush lines to me are magical. I remember when I was first trying to learn how to ink, I was doing mostly crow quill and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just inking my own drawings. And then I read an interview with Steranko, and he talked about inking with a brush, and I had never heard that before. So I had some crummy watercolor brushes. You know, I'm a college kid, and my art supplies are not top notch.
Right.
So I tried inking with one of those brushes, and I could have achieved better results if I would have gone out my yard and snapped off a stick from a tree and used that. That's how bad the inking was. So I kind of blew it off as well. I don't, you know, strength goes crazy. And then I went to a comic book convention, and I was talking to some of the artists, and Al Gordon was there, and he was inking a Ken Macklin piece while he was talking to other people. And he had a lapboard and the paper on the lapboard, and he was rotating the paper and doing all his strokes from left to right, and he would rotate the paper to accommodate that.
Right. Okay.
Right. And he wasn't even hardly even looking at it. He was just inking away as he was talking to somebody else. So I stood there for a half hour and just watching the brush, and I was mesmerized. I couldn't believe that someone could get those kinds of lines with a brush. The tiny little needle lines and the big thick contour lines. He was getting all those lines with the same tool. So I rushed home and bought some better brushes and started practicing. And from then on, it's just, to me, the lines that you can get from a brush are literally magical. They just have that quality to them that I haven't been able to duplicate with any other tool.
Yeah, I agree.
So I started doing portraits. I call them superhero portraits, like the I have in the background,
Right.
just for shows and conventions. And I put them up for sale and then sell prints at shows. And over a period of years, I've built up quite an inventory, but I do them in a specific style that is a little more labor intensive than the stuff that I would normally do in published comics. I would never do anything like this in a comic book because the page rates are so bad that I'd be living on the street if I tried doing that.
Right. It would take way too long. I mean,
So,
that'd be a gorgeous comic though.
yeah, it's like this Vasquez piece that I did.
Uh-huh.
You can see like the cross hatching on the arm. That's just using different weights. Basically, they're long feather lines. Two layers of cross hatching. And then I'll do something like this Ahsoka piece. This has a lot more layers of cross hatching on it. Like all this stuff is like 2, 3, 4 layers of cross hatching, and that takes a lot longer. It's like I said, I'm slow, and I one line, another line, so inking something like just doing cross hatching could take me all day. But I like the result, and I haven't figured out a quicker way to do it without compromising the line quality. So it's one of those bite the bullet, and when I start doing something like that, I know it's going to take me a long time, so I just have to commit to it and just go for it.
Right, just get through it. But yeah, the end result is amazing. So that's why I don't know if anybody watching this knows, but I've got 27 commissions from you so far, and they can see those in my CAF gallery, or I made videos for them because of the project that they go with, and then I'm gonna get 10 more hopefully by the end of the year if all goes well.
Yeah, we have to tack that phrase on for everything we do now.
What, if all goes well?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we talked about that on the last video that we had, how well things are going. Well, I guess, Gary, we're at about 30 minutes here, so I'm going to thank you. I really don't have any other questions right now, but if I come up with more, I will definitely get in contact with you. All right. Do you have any?
No, I don't have anything else to say. I think I've said enough, and hopefully I didn't get into trouble.
No. Yeah, and then I'm going to put a link to your CAF. So if somebody wants a commission, they can just contact you through Comic Art Fans and
Absolutely.
get a commission.
That's the easiest way. Yeah.
Okay.
Or just they want to buy some art, and plus your site, there's a few pieces.
Right. I have a couple of pieces on NSNart.
This morning I was looking at some of the stuff that I've got lying around that I wouldn't mind adding to your gallery. We can talk about that later.
All right. Well, all right. We'll talk about that later. But so I'm going to sign off on this for right now, and then we'll do some talking with this. So anybody that watched it, thank you for watching, and we will have more in the near future.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.